Hi, how you doing? I just had a question for Wal Thornhill. If if the trails of comets are made up of single hydrogen, single oxygen radicals, and space has enough dust to not just if NASA is lying to you, if NASA is lying about the signals they're receiving, the tests they're doing, whatever. But if your process is accurate and the universe really is as electric as you say it is, wouldn't there be a perpetual electric storm on the moon? Or at the very least, wouldn't there be a perpetual exchange of electric current between the Earth and the moon? Like, as the moon is spinning around the Earth, it would be hitting the dust. It and the Earth would be hitting the dust, the material that you're describing. Not only would that seismically affect the atmosphere, but the moon, where's all the lightning on the moon? Now, NASA says NASA says that there's a whole bunch of like glass dust on the surface of the moon that reacts to electricity. So equipment needs to be especially protected, and the glass dust like builds up on electrical equipment. And that, if true, would lead to rivers of glass following the currents and, you know, little mounts of pure glass fur. But even if NASA is lying about that, wouldn't the moon be constantly flickering with thunder? Like, wouldn't the surface of the moon have a constant layer of zapping bolts on the side of the moon that's like moving? Like, how does that work? How does that work? How, even if NASA is lying, even if the universe is actually electrical, even if all electrical science up to this point on Earth, which doesn't match your ideas of how electricity works at all, like bulk matter, like there's no such thing as a negatively charged comet, because there's no such thing as a negatively charged mountain, because that's not how like. But if it's a whole massive global conspiracy, if the thunder that hits planets and ruptures them and whatever was a real thing, and we just don't see it because it's like over a vast distance, the amount of particles to enable uh, an ice-free comet to make, hydrogen mono oxide radicals, the amount of matter in space would be so fantastically ridiculous that we would be constantly seeing a storm between a storm line between the moon and Earth. How does that work? How does that work? Why is it? How is it possible? Could someone explain that to me? Because it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And if the universe is electric, how come gravity works on Earth? How come gravity is detectable by a feather and but by observably detectable using big, dense, balls on Earth, like balls of stone. Like you can actually test it in your local university. And for that matter, how is it that there's something like 4,000 cities in the world with a population of 100,000 or more people in them? An enormous amount of universities everywhere. All those universities would have to be lying. All high schools would have to be lying. All those people with the various different belief structures and politics and animosity against each other would unifiably, including all the various pseudo NASA, like NASA style programs in all those various countries around the world. Every astronomer, astrological department in the world, all of those people, all of those groups of people with wildly varying political attitudes, all those people would have to agree to unifiably lie about the exact same thing that we can test on Earth with math and physical objects and museums. What's the point of maintaining the lie if there's all these museums that are barely profitable at all? Who goes to a museum? I live like a short bus ride away from a museum, and I don't visit it ever. Basically ever. One time there was like a sky bar, one of those things where you they lift you with a crane and you eat food. They set up in front of this big ass museum. I went there to eat food. One time, like when I was in high school, we went to the museum, but there's basically no one visits museums outside of rare events where people gather together and go. Like maybe some Austrian museums where they have glass walls full of bugs and cobras and whatever, but what's the point? Why would be the point of all of this lying? What would be the point? What are they hiding? Why are they lying? How does this work? Pop science is a bunch of reporters hearing stuff, sensationalizing the stuff, making up titles that are catchy, not titles that perfectly reflect what the research shows, and being really, really nice to people with sensationalized stories like the Gaia Network. Like, why? What is the point? What is the point? What is the motivation? And how come physics works fundamentally differently from anything you have described? How does my phone work if what you've described? Computer people, people who like gaming, there's millions of people who game. Some portion of those people understand what the parts in a computer do, the parts on your motherboard do. Those people who like to use copper coils to smelt metal online and do all kinds of scientific experiments just for shits and giggles and views, and all those idiots who electrocute themselves to death trying to char wood electrically. Some portion of those people understand basic stuff about how electricity works. People who, like, for example, like, electrically etch axes. Like, how? How does the aluminum industry work? How does anything work? How are batteries made? How is solar power a thing if everything you said makes even the tiniest amount of sense? Every process you have ever presented is debunked by people in their short shorts at home, pointing out fundamentally teenagers could debunk you. This does not make sense. Someone actually listen what this guy is actually saying, and then don't. How? If there's so much matter in space that it's electric, how are we not perpetually seeing a storm of electricity on the moon? How are we not perpetually seeing discharges between Earth and the moon? How? How does any of this work if real physics works in over 4,000 cities in the world with very basic experiments that disprove that stuff? How does electrical lines, everyone who's ever needed to use electricity industrially ever, how does all that work if your alternate reality physics of the cosmos thing is real? How? Explain it to me. Take all your critics' points, point by point. Do not lie about what the science says. Do not lie about what the research says. And explain yourself. Wal Thornhill.